The Democratic Republic of Congo, a nation synonymous with vast potential and enduring tragedy, finds itself once again grappling with the spectre of armed rebellion. The M23, a group with roots in the tangled history of ethnic conflict and resource exploitation that has plagued the region for decades, has resurfaced with a vengeance. Formed in 2012, the group initially gained notoriety for its capture of Goma, the strategic capital of North Kivu province, before being militarily defeated in 2013. Yet, like a ghost from a troubled past, the M23 has returned, more potent and ambitious than ever before. Their recent capture of Goma in January 2025, a city of over 1 million people perched on the shores of Lake Kivu, sent shockwaves through the region and beyond. This audacious move, achieved with alarming speed and military prowess, has raised critical questions about the group's true strength, their backing from regional actors, and the DRC government's capacity to defend its sovereignty. The M23's resurgence is not merely a localized security threat, it represents a dangerous escalation of a conflict that has simmered for years, claiming countless lives and displacing millions. Understanding the factors driving this latest chapter of violence, from the alleged role of neighboring Rwanda to the complex dynamics of ethnic tensions and the scramble for mineral wealth, is crucial to preventing a wider conflagration in the heart of Africa. The return of the M23 also highlights the international community's struggle to break the cycle of violence in the DRC. Despite billions of dollars in aid and the presence of one of the world's largest UN peacekeeping missions, the country remains vulnerable to armed groups and the exploitation of its vast mineral wealth. As the situation in the east deteriorates, the international community faces a stark choice: intervene decisively to support a lasting peace or risk witnessing another descent into chaos with devastating consequences for the Congolese people and the stability of the entire Great Lakes region. The fall of Goma to the M23 sent ripples of fear and uncertainty across the city. As rebel forces entered the city on January 28, 2025, after days of intense fighting with government troops, residents and observers alike were left reeling from the speed and decisiveness of the rebel advance. Goma, a city accustomed to its role as a regional hub and a haven for those displaced by conflict, found itself transformed overnight into a city under siege. The city's strategic importance made it a coveted prize for the M23. Situated on the border with Rwanda and serving as a vital transit point for trade and humanitarian aid, control of Goma affords the rebels not only symbolic victory, but also leverage over regional dynamics and access to crucial supply lines. The capture of the city, achieved with a combination of military force and strategic maneuvering, underscores the M23's growing capabilities and their ambition to project power beyond their traditional strongholds in the North Kivu countryside. The human cost of the city's capture has been immense. As government forces retreated and the M23 asserted control, a mass exodus of civilians unfolded, desperate to escape the crossfire and the uncertainty that lay ahead. The UN estimates that over 300,000 people fled Goma in the days following its capture, joining the ranks of the internally displaced, their lives upended by the resurgence of conflict. The humanitarian situation in and around Goma remains dire, with access for aid organizations severely restricted and reports of human rights abuses emerging from areas under M23 control. Looming over the conflict in eastern DRC is the long shadow of Rwanda, a nation intricately linked to its larger neighbor by history, geography, and the enduring legacy of past wars. The Rwandan government, led by President Paul Kagame, has been repeatedly accused by the DRC, UN experts, and Western powers of providing material and logistical support to the M23, charges Kigali vehemently denies. However, mounting evidence suggests a deep and troubling connection between the Rwandan state and the rebel group, now threatening to plunge eastern DRC into chaos. UN reports, based on eyewitness accounts, intercepted communications, and arms analysis, point to the direct involvement of Rwandan troops in the M23 offensive on Goma. These reports allege that between 3,000 and 4,000 Rwandan soldiers, equipped with sophisticated weaponry and operating with a level of coordination and discipline that belies any notion of rogue elements, actively participated in combat operations alongside the M23. Furthermore, the rebels' rapid advance and access to heavy artillery, capabilities that far exceed their previous strength, strongly suggest external backing from a state actor. Rwanda's alleged support for the M23 is often framed within the context of its long-standing security concerns in eastern DRC. Kigali argues that the DRC government has failed to address the presence of armed groups on its territory, some of which harbour animosity towards Rwanda and pose a potential threat to its security. Rwanda's actions, however, appear to be driven by a complex calculus of security interests, regional power dynamics and economic considerations, particularly access to the DRC's vast mineral wealth. The Rwandan government's denials in the face of mounting evidence ring hollow and further erode trust in the region, making a negotiated solution to the conflict even more elusive. The international community has watched the unfolding crisis in eastern DRC with growing alarm, issuing a chorus of condemnation against the M23's offensive and urging Rwanda to cease its alleged support for the rebel group. The UN Security Council, in a strongly worded statement, called for an immediate cessation of hostilities and the resumption of dialogue between the DRC government and armed groups operating in the east. However, concrete action beyond verbal censure has been limited, reflecting the international community's reluctance to become embroiled in a complex and long-running conflict. The US, a key player in the region, has imposed sanctions on several M23 commanders and called for Rwanda to withdraw its troops from Congolese territory. The European Union has echoed these calls and hinted at the possibility of further sanctions if Rwandan support for the M23 continues. However, these measures, while symbolically significant, are unlikely to sway Rwandan policy or compel the M23 to lay down their arms. Regional actors have also stepped up their engagement, albeit with mixed results. Angola and Kenya have led mediation efforts aiming to bring the warring parties to the negotiating table. However, deep mistrust between the DRC government, which refuses to negotiate with the M23, and Rwanda, which denies any involvement in the conflict, has hampered progress. The African Union has called for a regional summit to address the crisis, but it remains unclear whether such a gathering can bridge the deep divisions and competing interests that fuel the conflict. As the world watches, the situation in eastern DRC hangs in the balance, a stark reminder of the human cost of inaction and the urgent need for a concerted international effort to secure peace in a region teetering on the brink. Section 5 Riches and Exploitation. M23's grip on Congo's mineral heartland. The conflict in eastern DRC is not merely a struggle for territory or political power, it is deeply intertwined with the region's vast mineral wealth, a curse and a blessing that has fueled both development and exploitation for decades. The M23, like many armed groups before them, has sought to gain control over key mining areas, not only to finance their operations, but also as a source of leverage and a means to enrich their commanders. This scramble for resources has exacerbated the conflict, turning mineral-rich areas into battlegrounds and subjecting local populations to forced labor, extortion and displacement. Eastern DRC is home to vast deposits of gold, coltan, cassiterite and other minerals essential for the production of electronics, batteries and other high-tech products. These minerals, often referred to as conflict minerals, have become a source of illicit revenue for armed groups and a driver of instability in the region. The M23's control over key mining areas, particularly in North Kivu province, has allowed them to generate significant income through illegal taxation, smuggling and forced labor, fueling their military capabilities and prolonging the conflict. The exploitation of Congo's mineral wealth extends beyond the M23 and implicates a complex web of actors, including corrupt government officials, foreign companies, and regional smuggling networks. The international community has made some efforts to address the issue of conflict minerals, including through supply chain due diligence measures and targeted sanctions. However, the trade in conflict minerals continues to flourish, undermining peace efforts and perpetuating a cycle of violence and exploitation. Until the international community addresses the root causes of the conflict, including the illicit exploitation of natural resources, peace in eastern DRC will remain elusive. Section 6. A house divided, political deadlock and the spectre of regime change. The M23's resurgence occurs against a backdrop of political fragility and simmering tensions within the DRC. The country is still grappling with the legacy of decades of authoritarian rule, corruption and ethnic divisions, factors that have hampered its ability to build a stable and inclusive state. The current government, led by President Felix Tshisekedi, faces mounting criticism over its handling of the security situation in the east, accusations of corruption and a perceived inability to deliver on its promises of economic development and political reform. The M23, in its rhetoric and actions, appears to be exploiting this political climate, positioning itself not merely as a rebel group, but as a force for change within the DRC. The group has hinted at its ambition to march on Kinshasa, the capital, and overthrow the Tshisekedi government. A prospect that, while seemingly far-fetched, underscores the fragility of the DRC's political landscape. The political deadlock between the government and the opposition, coupled with the M23's military gains and inflammatory rhetoric, has raised fears of a wider conflagration. The DRC's history is replete with examples of internal conflicts spiraling into regional wars, drawing in neighboring countries and exacerbating ethnic tensions. The international community must use all available diplomatic tools to encourage dialogue, promote political reforms, and address the root causes of the conflict if it hopes to prevent the DRC from descending into another cycle of violence and instability. Section 7. The region on edge, a brewing storm in Central Africa. The conflict in eastern DRC has far-reaching implications, threatening to destabilize an already volatile region grappling with its own internal challenges and a complex web of interstate rivalries. The Great Lakes region, encompassing Burundi, Rwanda, Uganda and the DRC, has long been plagued by conflict, poverty and political instability. The resurgence of the M23 and the spectre of Rwandan involvement threatened to reignite old tensions, potentially drawing neighboring countries into a wider conflict with disastrous consequences for regional peace and security. Burundi, a small nation sharing a border with both Rwanda and the DRC, has already deployed troops to support the Congolese government's fight against the M23. This move, while presented as a gesture of solidarity with a neighboring country, also reflects Burundi's own security concerns regarding Rwandan influence in the region. Uganda, another key player in the region, finds itself in a delicate position. While officially allied with the DRC government in its fight against other armed groups, Uganda has also been accused of providing support to the M23, allegations it denies. The potential for the conflict to spill over into neighboring countries is real and concerning. The presence of armed groups operating across porous borders, coupled with historical grievances and competition for resources, creates a combustible mix that could easily ignite. The international community must recognize the regional dimensions of the conflict in eastern DRC and work to prevent its escalation. This requires addressing not only the immediate security challenges, but also the underlying political, economic and social factors that fuel instability in the Great Lakes region. Section 8. A sea of suffering, displacement, hunger and the cost of conflict. While the geopolitical implications of the conflict in eastern DRC dominate headlines, it is the human cost of this enduring crisis that demands the world's attention. Behind the statistics and strategic analyses lies a humanitarian catastrophe of staggering proportions, with millions of lives shattered by displacement, hunger and the constant threat of violence. The resurgence of the M23 has exacerbated an already dire situation, pushing a region scarred by decades of conflict to the brink. The UN estimates that over 5.7 million people are currently internally displaced within the DRC, the majority in the conflict-affected eastern provinces. The recent fighting in North Kivu has triggered a fresh wave of displacement, with hundreds of thousands fleeing their homes in search of safety and aid. These displaced populations, often lacking basic necessities such as food, water, shelter and healthcare, are particularly vulnerable to disease, exploitation and violence. Children are disproportionately affected by the conflict, facing risks of recruitment by armed groups, sexual violence, and the denial of education and other essential services. The humanitarian crisis in Eastern DRC is not merely a consequence of conflict. It is a tragedy compounded by chronic poverty, weak governance, and the limited capacity of the international community to respond effectively. Access to those in need remains a major challenge, with aid organizations facing insecurity, bureaucratic hurdles, and a lack of funding. The international community must prioritize the protection of civilians, ensure unimpeded humanitarian access, and provide the necessary financial and logistical support to meet the overwhelming needs of those affected by the conflict. Section 9. A glimmer of hope, the uncertain path to lasting peace. The situation in Eastern DRC, while dire, is not without hope. Amidst the violence and displacement, there are flickers of resilience, local initiatives working tirelessly to rebuild their communities, and a growing recognition that a lasting peace cannot be achieved through military means alone. The path to peace in Eastern DRC is undoubtedly complex and fraught with challenges, requiring a concerted effort from the Congolese government, regional actors, and the international community. A sustainable peace in Eastern DRC must address the root causes of the conflict, including weak governance, ethnic tensions, competition for resources, and the proliferation of armed groups. This necessitates a multi-pronged approach that combines security sector reform, political dialogue, economic development, and transitional justice mechanisms. The Congolese government must demonstrate its commitment to addressing the grievances of its people, tackling corruption, and ensuring equitable access to resources and opportunities. The international community has a crucial role to play in supporting the DRC's path to peace. This includes providing sustained financial and technical assistance for peace-building initiatives, strengthening the capacity of the Congolese security forces, and holding perpetrators of human rights abuses accountable. Regional actors must also play a constructive role, refraining from interfering in the DRC's internal affairs, supporting dialogue and promoting regional cooperation. The road to peace in Eastern DRC will be long and arduous, but it is a journey that must be undertaken with unwavering commitment and a shared belief in the possibility of a brighter future for the Congolese people.